Well, good morning, everyone. This is John Neerman, and it is my pleasure to call this meeting of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to order. Today is Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. The time is 9:30 a.m., and I'll begin with the roll call. Commissioner Lindley?
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Janeka?
Present.
Good morning. So our commissioners are all present, and how about our general counsel?
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Smith. And our public interest counsel?
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning, Mr. McWhirter. I'd like to remind folks to keep their microphones on mute when they're not speaking. I'd also like to remind anyone who is here only to listen that they can watch the meeting online, and that link is available on the agenda notice. For each item where argument or discussion is allowed, we will inform speakers of their time limits. Registration closed at 9:30, but if you'd like to address the commission on a particular item, please email agenda@tcq.texas.gov with your name, affiliation, and identify the item that you'd like to comment on, and we'll do our best to accommodate your request. For those making presentations, please wait to begin your presentation until I or our general counsel have asked you to begin speaking, and please check to make sure that your line is unmuted before you speak. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for being present. And Ms. Smith, I'll ask you to please call the first item.
The first item is old business, item number 1, the consideration of the adoption of an amendment to 30 Texas Administrative Code, section 336.1310 regarding radioactive substance rules. And the executive director's staff is here to present.
Morning, Ms. Forbes, and I think it's going to be you, Ms. Forbes, that presents. And I'll just say, don't feel compelled to repeat the presentation that you gave at the last agenda, but I'll invite you to add any additional comments or thoughts or remarks that you'd like. And then we will be accepting comments again from interested persons. So why don't you go ahead, Ms. Forbes?
Chairman, this is Megan. For some reason, it's frozen right now. I'm going to get it back up, and then I can unmute Ashley. She's muted for just a second.
Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
I can, thank you. And I'm not sure if you're able to hear me, but I just suggested, since you already presented this item at the last agenda, that you don't need to present it again, but I'd invite you to add any additional thoughts or comments you'd like to add before we turn to the interested persons.
Sure. Just good morning, Chairman, Commissioner, General Counsel, and Public Interest Counsel. On behalf of the Executive Director, I'm Ashley Forbes, Director of the Radioactive Materials Division, and with me is Amy Robinson of the Environmental Law Division. As we visited last week, this rulemaking amends Chapter 336 to adjust the Curie inventory charge. Interested parties presented at the last agenda. We have received several letters since the last agenda, and we have looked over those. We request approval for the adoption of the amendment to Chapter 336 and permission to make any non-substantive corrections to the adoption package if necessary to comply with Texas Register format and style requirements. And I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Forbes. I have none. Commissioner Lindley, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Janeka?
No questions for me, thanks.
All right. Ms. Smith, we'll hear next from the interested persons who signed in. If you could let us know who those are.
The first is Mr. Ben Lancaster, and he's the Chief of Staff for Senator Landgraf.
Good morning, Mr. Lancaster. Thanks for being on the line. You can go ahead when you're ready, please.
Good morning. Yes, Ben Lancaster here, Chief of Staff for Representative Brooks Landgraf out of Odessa, and I am reading a letter that he submitted to you, Mr. Chairman, on his behalf. And I believe it was shared with the other commissioners as well. Dear Chairman Neerman, as a state representative serving the people of Andrews County, where the Waste Control Specialist facility is located, please know that I support the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality's proposed rule regarding the disposal of low-level radioactive waste, rule number 2020-009-336-WS. If adopted, the proposed rule would amend Texas Administrative Code 336.1310 to adjust the current inventory charge fee in accordance with Texas Health and Safety Code 401.245, revised party state compact waste disposal fees. As you're aware, the Texas legislature expects a significant budget shortfall in 2021. The proposed rule will not reduce, but instead likely increase the revenue the state receives from WCS. Not only that, but by making WCS more competitive in the marketplace, this proposed rule will insulate the state of Texas from the costs associated with taking over operation of the facility at taxpayer expense. When the legislature authorized the Texas disposal facility, it recognized that market conditions would change from time to time, and the legislature gave TCEQ the authority to modify the fees for disposal at the compact facility. Changes precisely such as rule project number 2020-009-336-WS were expected. Accordingly, adopting this rule would appear to be in full compliance with the intent of the Texas legislature. Supporting this proposed rule is even beneficial to all parties involved. It lowers prices to Texas business, including utilities, energy producers, hospitals, research facilities, and to their consumers. It provides the facility operator the opportunity to continue to compete in the marketplace rather than keeping their price floor above the market rate. It continues to provide surcharges to the state of Texas and Andrews County, some of which would otherwise be lost. There is no change to the surcharge rate. Simply stated, a business is not likely to lower prices or fees unless doing so would increase revenue. The legislature has aligned Texas with the facility operator in this manner because as sales increase at the facility, more surcharges are paid to Texas, thereby increasing much needed revenue to the state of Texas and the local governments in Andrews County. WCS, a critical infrastructure facility that has maintained the safest and most robust facility in the nation for the disposal of low-level waste. This proposed rule makes sense for Texas and for the Andrews community, who after all are most impacted by this facility. It's worth noting that I do not necessarily support every plan that this facility operator has, but I absolutely support this proposed rule. I appreciate your consideration of this matter. Please reach out to me with any questions you may have. God bless Texas, Brooks Landgraf.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. I appreciate that, and please thank Representative Landgraf for us as well. And Ms. Smith, who do we have signed in next?
Next, we have Mr. Richard Halpin.
Good morning, Mr. Halpin. Go ahead when you're ready, sir.
Thank you so much, Chairman and Commissioners. I appreciate you being there. First of all, I want to just say I'm profoundly impressed with your willingness to be so responsible and servants to the state, the public of Texas, for choosing these positions and the time it takes to do your work so thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. I'm really concerned, folks, about I am Richard Halpin, and I am a co-chair of the First UU Green Sanctuary Ministry. I'm speaking with you as a concerned Texan. In these extraordinary times, with so many financial shortfalls coming down on our state budget, I am surprised and frankly, I'm alarmed that as a public representative group, you are being asked to reduce funding coming to our state. I just am curious, and I frankly find it a false premise that there's competition of such an overwhelming nature to WCS. From the research I've done, there's very little competition, and of course we live in a free market society. So to ask you to give them a leg up to block competition seems antithetical to the way our economy works. So I find that baffling. It's putting you in a very awkward position to give them to give anybody a monopoly on any kind of a process. You're being challenged also with material that is so dangerously complex that it has never been seen on the historical landmark before. And you're being asked to go out on a limb here with things, potential consequences that could have profound effect on our Texas, on our people, and on our economy. I just really don't think it's fair to you to put you in this kind of position. And what are the shortfalls and the long-term impacts of the request to you vis-a-vis the state budget? I would love to see a study on what those shortfalls and long-term effects financially and practically would be. The governor, our governor, as you know, called this situation when it came before the legislature an ill-advised request. If this request were granted, and I certainly hope that it's not without more research and more review, what would be the consequences financially and practically, physically for Texans? How would those losses be made up? Given the enormous shortfalls we're facing, I'm frankly surprised that you're not being asked to increase the rates for a company of this nature. Because as you know, and God forbid, and my prayers are thoroughly with this, that we'll never have any kind of an accident. But should we have an accident of any kind? And we thought we'd never have an accident moving petroleum. And as you know, we've had terrible truck and train accidents with petroleum. But should we have any accident, one accident, with this dangerous radioactive material, thousands, tens of thousands could be hurt. So I appreciate you looking into this. Thank you so much again for your time. Megan, did you say my time is up? Well, somebody said something.
Yeah, she did, sir. And thank you for your comments, Mr. Halpin. I appreciate you calling in this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for your hard work and standing up for Texas.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, who's next?
Mr. David Rosen.
Good morning, Mr. Rosen.
Good morning, Chairman. Can you hear me well?
I can, sir. Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I want to address a couple things that came up 2 weeks ago in the meeting. I felt that Mr. Carlson was a bit disingenuous when he said that WCS and North Star have separate boards of directors. While that is true, they do have the same CEO, Mr. Scott State, and both of the companies have Jeffrey Eddix as their CFO. So these companies are clearly very intertwined, and they're both owned by J.F. Lehman and Company. So one company is trying to do a favor for its sister company and give them a break on the Curie cost. And I feel like this is self-dealing, essentially. Furthermore, Representative Landgraf's letter talks about the Texas legislature. Well, indeed, the legislature didn't even bring Mr. Landgraf's bill to the floor. And they put in an amendment to another bill to try and get it passed. And it was not clear to the legislature what was going on. And of course, the governor vetoed it when he caught the error. And so I ask you once again to realize that these companies, North Star and WCS, also known as ISP, are closely connected. And to say that they are the only company, they're not the only companies that can do this, is somewhat disingenuous. I feel like one company is paving the way for its sister company. I think this is completely inappropriate and shouldn't be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosen. Ms. Smith, who's next?
Mr. Adrian Shelley.
Good morning.
Yes,
Go
good
ahead.
morning. Can you hear me? This is Adrian Shelley with Public Citizen, speaking in opposition to the proposal. appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate the Commission's thoughtfulness in taking some time to review this proposal. I just want to renew my concerns, and so I'll try to be brief. I agree with Mr. Halpin that this is a difficult position that you all are being put in. You've essentially been asked to consider the business interests of one company against the economic interests of the state, and indeed against public interest itself. The proposal would reduce the fee in question by a factor of 8, and WCS has argued that that's necessary in order to bring in business that it needs in order to stay profitable. By reducing the fee a factor of 8, that to me sounds like we would anticipate an 8-fold increase in importation if we weren't going to see a revenue decrease to the state. And that math just doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand why this is a priority of the Commission right now. I think it's unfortunate. I think there are other places that we should be putting our time and our resources, given the pandemic and the limitations that we face on all sides right now. So I just want to renew my concerns. I don't believe that this is in the economic interest of the state or in public interest. I don't envy you for being asked to make this decision, but I'm afraid that the business interests of a private company are going to win out, and I think that's unfortunate. So thank you for your time, and good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Ms. Smith, who's next?
Terry Burns.
Morning, Mr. Burns.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Terry Burns, actually. I'm the chair of the Alamo Group of the Sierra Club, and I lived in Midland and practiced pathology in Midland, Odessa, and Andrews hospitals for many, many years. I've followed the WCS nuclear story from its very beginning, and I've toured the site. WCS, with apparent TCQ support, seeks basically to use the regulatory process to achieve the special favors its strong lobbying efforts have failed to achieve in the last legislature. They have a long history of these types of efforts. No action by TCQ today will end this story. If they don't get what they want now, they'll be back in 2020, and I urge you to do it then with the legislative process as our democracy calls for. They want taxpayers to subsidize their private profits. I reject the idea that charging almost nothing makes up for it in volume. We used to see that with medicine. You get a discount and you're supposed to. It doesn't make sense. So they claim financial distress, and yet their website boasts that they're the only commercial facility to receive these A, B, and C low-level wastes. These rate reductions are not substantiated, and I don't see where you've evaluated the financial risk to the taxpayers and corroborated their claims. I urge you to reject this request. I think that the risks, as mentioned, of an accident and the taxpayers being having to bear the cost of all of this is enormous. And in this COVID crisis of economics and health for all of us, we shouldn't be asked to subsidize this company at this time. And you should be just, as was said previously, working hard on other things. This is a risk to us, health-wise, financially, et cetera. Please reject this request and let them come back in the legislature, as I'm sure they will. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. Appreciate your comments. Ms. Smith, who's next?
Ms. Karen Haddon.
Morning, Ms. Haddon. Ms. Haddon, we can't hear you, so you might double check your microphone. Ms. Haddon, are you there? Ms. Smith. Let's come back to Ms. Haddon.
Ms. Sharon Ritchie?
Morning, Ms. Ritchie. And Ms. Ritchie, we can't hear you either. Ms. Ritchie, are you there?
This is Karen Haddon. Can you hear me now?
I sure can. Why don't we go ahead with you, Ms. Haddon? Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I'm representing the SEED Coalition, Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Coalition. We're a statewide organization. We're very concerned about this item and appreciate your time on it. We remain opposed to this item, and I'm concerned about the loss of revenue to the state of Texas that this represents. It's a massive reduction in the fees, and therefore, as a result, there would be less coming into the state coffers. We're going to need that money. It's a matter of time. When you look at other facilities that have handled radioactive waste around the country, over time, problems come, and it's just almost inevitable. You can look at all of them, and the cleanup costs tend to be extremely high. They range well into the billions.
Ms. Haddon, I think your audio cut off. We can't hear you. Ms. Haddon, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Sure can. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I apologize.
I heard up to billions, cleanup costs into the billions, and then we lost you.
Great. Okay. So those are the concerns we've got. And also, I think we need to consider the long-term picture. If more waste comes into this site, we're also going to have more liability on the tail end when the state does take over the site. So I think we need to look real carefully at what is in our state's best interest. I also think that this rulemaking goes against what the legislature was trying to do. And granted, it's looking at carry charge as opposed to surcharges, but the net impact is a loss of revenue to the state. The state bills had a fiscal note of $3 million. I think it could be much, much more, many millions of dollars, when you consider the decommissioning projects. So I would urge you to vote no on this, and also to withdraw the item today and to come back with it posted so that the public has a better chance to weigh in an official comment period. Most of us don't wake up and read the state register and look for what might be happening today that we should be concerned about. I don't, and we didn't know this was happening, and it slipped us by. And this is a time of COVID when people are trying to figure out how to do things that we have to do in new and different ways to stay healthy. We're trying to figure out how to feed families and keep finances afloat. This is not an easy time, and this did get missed. And I think if we had been included, the public included as stakeholders, notice would have been given, and we could have commented in a more timely manner. That, I think, is reason enough to do this over again and give people time to comment. This is an important measure that has been hotly debated in the legislature, that has fiscal impacts to the state, and we don't even know fully what those are yet. I agree with the comment that there needs to be a fiscal analysis that goes with the rulemaking. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Haddon. I appreciate your comments. And let's check to see if Sharon Ritchie has been able to join us. Ms. Ritchie, are you there? I don't hear Ms. Ritchie. Ms. Smith, who's next?
Ms. Meredith McGuire?
Good morning, Ms. McGuire. Are you there? Ms. McGuire, you might double check your microphone. Ms. McGuire? Right, Seaman, we're not able to hear from Ms. McGuire. We'll give Ms. Ritchie one more shot here. Ms. Ritchie, are you on the line? Not hearing either Ms. McGuire or Ms. Ritchie. Ms. Smith, are there anybody else signed in?
Mr. Carlson for WCS.
Morning, Mr. Carlson. Go ahead when you're ready.
Sure. I signed in primarily to answer questions if you had them, but let me clarify just a couple of things. The first one is the project that North Star is doing at Vermont Yankee is in the compact, and so the prices we're talking about actually set a ceiling for the most that we can charge to North Star, but not a floor. So in fact, we can, within, up to the ceiling, we could charge any price to North Star if that made sense, or we could lower the price to any level. This would not be necessary, this action that we're taking today, to change any price to North Star on that Vermont Yankee project. And secondly, as I think Karen Haddon noted, the fee that we're talking about is different from the surcharge. It is only a part of the total fees. There's also fees that are charged based on volume coming in. This is just based on the carries. And the net impact of this change will be to increase revenues to the state and to increase revenues to the operator. Without this reduction, we would simply not be able to compete and not be able to have any revenue from that particular item, which we would lose. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Appreciate that. Let's try Ms. McGuire one more time. Ms. McGuire, are you on the line there? We'll give Ms. Ritchie one more shot. Ms. Ritchie, are you on the line? I'm afraid we're not going to be able to hear from them this morning, so we'll hear next from our Public Interest Council.
Good morning. For the record, Dick McWhorter. The rule preamble and the agenda backup materials state that staff's review determined that amending the fee in the rate table at Rule 336.1310 is appropriate and consistent with Texas Health and Safety Code Section 401.245. OPIC has no basis to dispute that finding. We defer to staff and have no objection to adoption of the amended rule.
Thank you, Mr. McWhorter. Colleagues, I think it's our turn to share our thoughts. And Commissioner Janecka, let me begin with you again.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate all the points that have been raised again this morning, as well as those that were brought to our attention 2 weeks ago. And I think this is a difficult issue to address because it touches on what is still very much a live political issue that the legislature considered. And I think there's still plenty to argue in this discussion, but it really goes to policy goals that are the purview of the legislature. And I think that it's important to point out here in this instance, my view is that these are, a lot of the comments we hear are perfectly apt, but we need to keep in mind that this has a very similar effect to the legislative actions that were sought last legislative session. The net impact would be to reduce the final price charged to customers of this site. The important thing here, I believe, is that they are two very different levers that have the same goal. And where a lot of these concerns that have been raised, and they hit on exactly a lot of the implicit policy goals that you and that certainly I feel that it's always critical to keep in mind as a public servant in the state of Texas. It's always worthwhile trying to protect the revenue of the state of Texas, trying to preserve, in this instance, make sure there's adequate capacity in the disposal site, the Texas Compact site. However, those implicit goals are all fair game at every point in the process. Certainly, for our commission's decision before us today, those are not explicit requirements that need to be considered and proven up and met. And so I think it's certainly relevant to raise those issues on this flag. And I commend and I appreciate all the stakeholders in providing this input today. And I I think that this discussion should continue as the state continues to wrestle with what, in this case, really is continuing to try to make sure we get the approach right. We're wrestling with the equation on a entirely unique policy issue. How do you site and operate a state compact low-level waste disposal facility? And, let's be candid, Texas is the only state to do so since Congress acted in 1985, telling all the states, go out and do this. And so that said, a lot of the issues and concerns, benefits to particular companies or to outside actors, in this instance, we are really strictly looking at a rate question. And the customers were noticed, and all of these stakeholders who are raising concerns ultimately wouldn't even be given an opportunity for standing if this were to be pushed over to a contested case. If we were to restart the process, the WCS were to notify their customers again per our requirements, and any of these parties today who've spoken to us were to contest that rate or request it, I think ultimately our commission would look at and find the fact that they're not customers of WCS, and so it's not appropriate to call them part of the mix in the rate question to move on to SOA for a contested case hearing. I think ultimately that really bears out how this issue is one narrow facet of a broader policy question, and I appreciate all the input today that goes to that policy question, but ultimately what I believe is the commission's decision before us is a slightly different matter, and looking at this problem in the manner that the legislature has instructed us to as a ratepayer question. I think all of the requirements have been met. I'm comfortable and satisfied with ED's analysis of those factors that we have been instructed to address and that we put into our rules and instructed by the legislature. I'll back up and just clarify. And the impacts on revenues to the state, that's a fair question to raise, but I think that is a very difficult question to predict. And so I want to acknowledge, and I'm in support of ED staff in the analysis on this item, finding that it was a could not be determined impact, because you've had the Legislative Budget Board on this exact conceptual question. Again, different lever, because this is pulling the rate to reduce the price versus reducing a surcharge to reduce the price. In trying to run that thought experiment, if the price goes up or down, do disposals increase or decrease? We've literally had conflicting views by some of the same entities over the past 10 years as the legislature has wrestled with these sorts of questions and tried to evaluate them. So there's no question that it's a very complex economic problem to try to wrap your head around. And I think also helps support the argument that perhaps this is not the best scenario to try to apply a rate solution to. And frankly, you or I, as water or power customers in the state of Texas, where there may be a rate process that goes before PUC in some review, we're a captive market in a way that some of the generators in this furthest facility, the customers, aren't captive in the same way, because the point was made early on. I believe Mr. Halpin raised the sales language that WTS has used about being the one and only, and having a unique monopoly, or not monopoly, rather a unique sole ownership of being the only commercial site available to the entire U.S. or all customers for all classes of waste. That's absolutely true, but I think we have found, and the markets are much more complex than just what sites are regulated for that type of waste. Generators have been very creative, and these requests to try to adjust prices downward in order to reach the market rate are not new to North Star assuming control of WCS. And so I will just point out that on balance, these are all a lot of really live political issues that Commissioner Lilly and Chairman Newman, you both have my sympathies in having much less of the lead up of the conversation, but in my efforts over the past 2 weeks to try to revisit and make sure that I fully understand all the concerns that have been addressed, I've been reassured time and again that ultimately there's a lot of fair policy questions that have been raised, but those all belong to the legislature, and I'm comfortable again today. I think I'm comfortable moving forward, and I think it's appropriate to move forward with approval of this rule matter at this time, and it will give us one more valuable data point as actual disposal goes up, down, or otherwise in response to the surcharge. That's all we can do, and that's the appropriate move for, in my view, that's the appropriate move for the state to continue to do, is to try to take actions and move the levers as we can and just continue to get more information about this. I'm not sure that we're at the right answer on how to govern a compact site, because this is the first one that's been done since ever in the United States. So I think we're all continuing to wrestle with it, but I'll stop there, see if either of you have questions or wanted to discuss any of these points in more detail.
Thank you, Commissioner Janeka. I don't have any immediate reactions to that. Commissioner Lindley, how about you?
I don't have any immediate reactions. The only thing I'll chime in and say is that, by and large, I agree with Commissioner Janeka. I think, well, first I want to commend the executive director's staff on this, because they did do a deep dive, and I know it was a lot of work. I'll just leave it at that. And I appreciate the deep dive that not only the Radioactive Waste Division did, but also our folks in financial and everywhere that was engaged on this rulemaking. I do agree that this is a ratepayer question before us today in this rulemaking. And I will agree that it is a weird, for lack of a better term, spot to be in for the state to be weighing in on one private company. But that's the way it's been set up, and that's what's before us today. I just, I do think that's weird, and I know there are one or two people in the commenters that kind of made that point, and I'm doing it in a more casual way by saying it's weird, but that is my opinion on it. I don't like weighing in necessarily on one private company's business, but that's what's before us, and that's the way the legislature set it up. So that's what we're here to do today. And so I don't have any other questions. I will just end by saying that I agree with what's in front of us today, that I will vote to adopt it and move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. And let me express my thanks to staff as well. I really don't have anything additional to say to what I said last week. I'm in the same place. It sounds like we three are unanimous in wanting to move forward. So I'll invite any final comments from either of you or a motion to that effect.
I can make a motion if we're ready and see if we're in agreement. I move that we adopt amended section 336.1310 of the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 336, as recommended by the Executive Director.
I would second that motion.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Janeka?
I vote aye.
I also vote aye. The motion carries. Ms. Smith, please call the next item.
New business, item number 1 is the petition for the creation of the Arcola Municipal Management District number 1. The petitioner who seeks the district's creation should present the matter, followed by interested persons, and I believe right now we don't have anyone signed in on this. The ED and then OPIC. OGC recommends initially limiting the parties to 5-minute presentations, but the petitioner may save time for rebuttal as it bears the burden of proof. And I believe that the petitioner, Mr. Rich Muller, for the petitioner, is here to present.
Good morning, Mr. Muller. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. Hope all of y'all are doing well. With me, Nino Corbett with Post Oak Point Development. He's the developer on the project, and if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to turn it over to him to just give you a brief presentation on the project, and then we'll be available to answer any questions.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nino Corbett. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you in regard to our petition. Post Oak Point, this development is the culmination of a significant amount of collaboration with the public officials, starting with the city of Arcola and going straight up through the county level. Specifically, this $35 million development is directed towards a community of first-time buyers. And the collaboration I'm referring to is that what will be included in the development is a renovation of the Arcola City Hall. Arcola is a very small incorporated city within Fort Bend County that's frankly been underserved for a considerable period of time. And the City Hall was damaged during Harvey. We intend to renovate it. In addition to the renovation, we will be constructing the first water plant to be constructed within the city of Arcola. We'll be renovating the wastewater plant. We will also be constructing a middle school in this development. So the culmination of all of these parts really has gotten the full support of not only the city of Arcola, Fort Bend County, but also Fort Bend Independent School District. It's simply a very positive, transformative development within a city limits of a city that really has very little infrastructure at this time. I appreciate the opportunity to present this project to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments. Anything else, Mr. Mueller?
Yeah, I just, to echo Nino's point, just some facts about Arcola from the Census Bureau. The population is about 2,600. It is a majority minority community. Median household income is $44,000, and about 1 in 4 people live below the poverty line. So this is a significant investment in a part of the county that desperately needs it. They get a lot of things out of it. And as Nino mentioned, it has full support of the city, the county, and the school district.
Thank you, sir. That helps give us a sense of what the project's about. I appreciate that. Commissioner Lindley, do you have any questions for the petitioner?
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Janeka?
I'm just curious to hear more of how this project directly serves that majority-minority community of Arcola. Is there any direct way other than the how it will indirectly allow you to move forward with those revisions on the courthouse or updates, renovation, as well as I saw that there may be some requirements to upgrade wastewater services or similar city services down the road. But my understanding was these are new. It's creation of a new district with currently undeveloped properties. So I'm curious how the current serving community fits in with this proposed district creation.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry if we didn't kind of make that clear. So right now, Arcola gets its water from an adjoining jurisdiction. The development of the water plant that we will do will also allow them to provide water service directly to their residents. It will allow them to expand that plant in the future to serve other areas of development in the city. And at the end of the day, we hope that the addition of the middle school and the commercial properties proposed for this development will help the overall tax base in the city of Arcola, both property tax and sales tax related. So, I think we view this as a rising tide lifts all ships type endeavor. And, it's really the first significant investment made in the city of Arcola since it's been created.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the answer and had one other that helped clarify it for me. The other question that I had was just if you might be able to speak to the 2 different meets and bounds descriptions that were provided to the executive director staff at the early points in this process. I'd just love to hear a little bit more, if you could, about what required that slight up, or the update, which had a slight revision in there. Love to hear a little more of that description. I think it was a very, very marginal difference in total area, but there was a 5 tracks versus 2 tracks in 2 different meets and bounds submittals. Can Can you speak to that, please?
I think I can elaborate on it. This is Nino Corbett speaking. What the adjustment represented was frankly, a public right-of-way that goes through the middle of the project. And it was brought in order to assure the city that the maintenance of this road would be included within this entity. I believe that addresses your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, and Commissioner Janeka, I noticed that issue too, and I think it raised a question about whether or not the city had approved of the updated meets and bounds, and I just, it is such a tiny de minimis difference. I don't think it's going to make any difference to anybody, but the city is certainly able and welcome to raise an objection, except that they haven't signed in this morning. But if they have real concerns about this, that I think are highly unlikely, but if they do, they have some remedies to them. So I answered that question kind of for myself in that fashion, and I'm ready to forge ahead. Commissioner Lindley, anything else from you before we move on?
No, I appreciate that discussion because that question came up with me as well as far as meets and bounds, but I feel comfortable with what's in front of us today. So I think it's been vetted, and I would be comfortable moving forward granting it. So
great. Thank you. No one else has signed in to speak, so we'll hear next from the Executive Director.
Good morning. My name is Kayla Murray, and I'm an attorney with the Environmental Law Division representing the Executive Director. Chris Ullman with the District Section is also on the line. The Executive Director received a petition from Post Oak Point Limited for the creation of Arcola Municipal Management District Number 1 pursuant to Chapter 375 of the Texas Local Government Code. I do have two corrections I would like to make for the record. On page 3 of the May 6, 2020 technical memo, underneath stormwater drainage system, I would like to correct that the Briscoe Canal does not flow into Mustang Bayou, rather they cross each other. In addition, on page 4 of that same memo, underneath topography, most of the site currently drains towards the southeasterly direction, discharging into a tributary of the Briscoe Canal and not the Brazos River. We have reviewed the petition and concluded that all applicable requirements have been met. The ED recommends granting the petition for district creation. We're available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. I have none. Commissioner Lindley?
no questions.
Commissioner Janeka?
None. Thanks, Ms. Murray.
We'll hear from Public Interest Counsel.
Zick McWhirter, for the record, OPIC agrees with the ED that the petitioner has shown that creation of a district is feasible, practicable, and would benefit the land in the district. OPIC recommends granting the petition of Post Oak Point Limited for creation of Arcola Municipal Management District Number 1 as proposed by the ED.
Thank you, and I agree with that. I think all the evidence is that the petitioner has met the procedural and substantive requirements for formation, including that the district is feasible and necessary and would benefit the public, and further that the proposed directors are all qualified. So with that, I'll invite any additional comments or a motion. Commissioner Lindley?
I don't have any other comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Janeka?
Thanks. No comments from me. I will make the motion that we grant the petition for the creation of Arcola Municipal Management District Number 1 and issue the commission order for creating the district and appointing 5 initial directors as recommended by the Executive Director.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
I did second, just if it was second that for the record. I vote aye.
I'm sorry to forge ahead so quickly, but we had a motion. We had a second. We have a vote in favor by Commissioner Lindley, and Commissioner Janeka, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
My apologies for rushing things, but we're unanimous. I vote aye as well. The motion carries. Ms. Smith, when you're ready, I'll ask you to please call the next item.
Thank you very much.
Item number 2 is the consideration of a resolution appointing 7 nominees to and continuing the existence of the Water Utility Operator Licensing Advisory Committee. The Executive Director's staff is here to present.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners, General Counsel, and Public Interest Counsel. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. I'm Haya Zeman, Director of the Permitting and Registration Support Division, on behalf of the Executive Director. With me is also Alicia Ramirez with the Environmental Law Division. We're here today to request the Commission's consideration and approval to appoint a total of 7 individuals to the Water Utility Operator Licensing Advisory Committee, also known as WULAC. These recommended appointments will replace advisory committee members whose terms expire on August 31st, 2020. 2 of the nominees are reappointments. That includes David Garza and Robert Starr. And the other 5 nominees are new appointments and include Larry Bell, David Harris, Jake Hollingsworth, Karen Menard, and Crystal Ibanez. If approved, these terms will run from September 1st, 2020 and will expire on August 31st, 2024. Staff also requests the Commission approve continuing the existence of the Advisory Committee until August 31st, 2024. WULAC consists of 13 members who represent various water and wastewater regulated entities from diverse geographic areas of the state, ethnic groups, businesses, government entities, and associations. WULAC's sole duty is to advise the Commission regarding water and wastewater operator licensing and training issues and to facilitate communication between the Commission and the water and wastewater utility industries. The WULAC has no executive or administrative powers or duties with respect to the operation of the Commission, and all such powers and duties rest solely with the Commission. A notice of request for nominations to fill these vacancies was published in the February 7th, 2020 issue of the Texas Register. An email solicitation was also sent to all the individuals who hold a current TCEQ water license. In addition, current members were also asked to recommend potential members. The Permitting and Registration Support Division received a total of 35 nominations. After a thorough review of all the nominees and making a reasonable attempt to provide a balanced representation, staff is recommending the appointment of 7 nominees to the Advisory Committee. The 7 recommended nominees would balance the representation across the state with current members with respect to geographic location, technical background and experience, and affiliations with associations, government entities, or training providers. In conclusion, staff respectfully request adoption of this resolution. Thank you, and we're available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Zeman. I have none. Commissioner Lindley?
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Janeka?
I don't want to exhaustively give questions to Ms. Zeman, but I did want to just know, if, in your view, Ms. Zeman, was this a higher year than typical in terms of interest from the public in seeking nomination to this organization, this group, this committee?
No, I don't believe so. I think that we've always had an interest in people nominating, other people nominating themselves to continue to serve in some capacity. We did have a nice selection of individuals this time around, but not unusually high.
Good to know. I appreciate that context, and that was one question in my mind. I only wanted to observe on this matter, and I commend EV staff on the work on it. I think it was well handled, and I'm comfortable with the panel you're recommending. I did note that there is a potential gap in terms of representing water operator interests that may be unique to the Upper Rio Grande Valley, and I only wanted to raise that flag as I'll commend you and the rest of ED staff to please don't be shy about taking on the mantle of how to be more creative in better advertising or trying to connect the gap. If there's just very little interest among the water operating utility in that part of the state in this sort of engagement, I can certainly understand that, but maybe there's just a new way that we can try to advertise the opportunity here. I think that's a part of the state that has very unique water demands that the water operators are facing some unique circumstances that would be very different than East Texas, the Panhandle, Lower Rio Grande Valley. That's the one point I wanted to touch on, and don't exhaust it other than just to say good work and appreciate all your efforts on recommendations you may have in the future on how to remedy that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that suggestion.
Thank you, Commissioner Janek. Ms. Smith, is there anyone signed in to speak on this item?
No one is signed in.
Mr. McWhirter, what are your thoughts?
OPIC recommends approval of the resolution appointing new members to the Water Utility Operator Licensing Advisory Committee and authorizing existence of the committee until August 31st, 2024, as presented by the Executive Director.
Thank you. And Commissioner Janek, I appreciate your comments, and I also want to thank staff for all their hard work on this. And also, of course, the members of the committee, thank you for serving, and to all the nominees for their willingness to serve. We appreciate that. This committee does perform a vital role for the commission. So I think clearly we should continue it. And I approve of the nominees recommended by the Executive Director. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this resolution. Commissioner Lindley, what are your thoughts?
I'm in favor as well. I appreciate all those that applied and the men and women that were selected. I always enjoy looking at those bios, and I think it's an impressive group and a well-qualified group. So I can make a motion if we're ready.
I think so. Go ahead.
I move that we adopt the Executive Director's proposed resolution continuing the existence of the Water Utility Operator Licensing Advisory Committee until August 31st, 2024, and appoint the following nominees with terms effective September 1, 2020, for a 4-year term to expire August 31st, 2024. Larry Bell, David Garza, David Harris, Jake Hollingsworth, Karen Menard, Robert Starr, and Crystal Ibanez.
I second the motion.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Janeka?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The motion carries. Ms. Smith, when you're ready, please call the next item.
Item number 3 is the consideration of gifts and donations of $500 or more in value given to the TCEQ and submitted for approval in accordance with Chapter 575 of the Texas Government Code. The Executive Director's staff is here to present.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, General Counsel, and Public Interest Counsel. For the record, my name is Yen Tran of the General Law Division, representing the Executive Director. Before you are the gifts and donations received by the agency in the past 90 days. In accordance to Chapter 575 of the Government Code, the Executive Director has accepted these gifts and respectfully request your acknowledgement of these gifts. As always, I'm available to answer any questions you may have concerning these items.
Thank you. I have none. Commissioner Lindley? Commissioner
No questions.
Janeka?
Thank you.
None for me. Appreciate y'all keeping us in compliance with this requirement.
You're very welcome.
Ms. Smith, has anyone signed in?
No one is signed in on this one.
And Mr. McWhirter, what are your thoughts?
OPIC recommends approval of the resolution acknowledging acceptance of gifts and donations as presented by the ED.
And I agree. I think we should issue this resolution. And Commissioner Lindley, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll jump in here. I'll move that we approve issuance of the resolution acknowledging the Executive Director's acceptance of the gifts and donations contained in the TCEQ Interoffice Memorandum to the Commissioners dated June 22nd, 2020, docket number 2020-0662-MIS.
A second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Janeka?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The motion carries. Ms. Smith, when you're ready, please call the next items.
That takes us to our enforcement docket, items 4 through 40, and the Executive Director's staff is here to present these matters.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, General Counsel, and Public Interest Counsel. For the record, my name is Melissa Cordell of the Enforcement Division, and with me today are Brian Sinclair, also of the Enforcement Division, and Charmaine Backens of the Litigation Division, representing the Executive Director. Pending before you are items 4 through 40. The total assessed administrative penalties are $1,110,138, with $282,941 deferred, $319,613 applied for supplemental environmental projects, and $507,584 to the general revenue. We respectfully request approval of these items and are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I have none. Commissioner Lindley?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. I don't know. I can make it now, or if I can give my other time.
Why don't we go ahead now?
Okay. Well, this third from item 37, that's going to be the example. I don't have any questions about it necessarily, or want to propose any changes to it, but it just kind of got me thinking, just so y'all know where this is coming from. I do think sometime soon, I'm not going to put a date on it, but I believe we need to have an enforcement discussion on our penalty policy, and I know the executive director's been working on that and some proposed changes they want to see made or proposed. What stuck out to me with this one is I just have real concerns with an entity getting a 10% discount when they've falsified documents. And let me just say, I know there's a lot more to this case than what I just said. And I know that in this instance, this entity did not have the financial ability to pay. And so because of that, I'm okay with how the executive director landed on this. And what I'm not saying, I want to be clear, is that I do not have a problem with a 10% reduction for being a high performer. I think that's a good tool. I think it helps out a lot of entities out there, whether they're small or big, that have potentially a hard time understanding our rules, and they abide as best they can, and they're a good performer, and then something happens. And so in no way is this a threat or a discussion that I want to have about changing that. I think the 10% reduction for high performer is good. But what stuck out to me, and I just think we need to have discussion about it, is if you falsify documents and you forge over 650, in this instance, 650 tickets, and you still get a 10% reduction, again, I know there's more to this than that, but if those were the only bullet points I saw, I would have I'd have a real issue with it. And so I'm just kind of tossing that out there, that this one stuck out to me as an example on that topic. Again, I don't want to change the 10%. Well, I shouldn't say it that way. There might be, depending on the issue, depending on the violation that's occurred, there might need to be a discussion about if reductions are allowed or not. But again, I don't want to change the 10% reduction significantly. I think it depends on the violation at hand. And this one just stuck out to me as, and there were a couple instances in this docket of, I think there were falsification and that kind of thing. And so, I'm using this one as the example, but it's a larger policy discussion that I think we need to dive into. And, it's my understanding the executive director wants to have a penalty policy discussion at some point. And so those are things that I'll kind of want to be interested in hearing more about. Again, everything came out okay on this one. After I dived into it a little more, I understand how the executive director got there, and I'm comfortable with it. But initially, it caused me a little bit of pause. So that's my only comment. I don't expect anyone, if anyone wants to weigh in, whether that's either of you two or the executive director, that's fine. I'm not trying to have a big policy discussion here and now. I just wanted to make that comment while it was fresh on my brain. And so that's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. Commissioner Janeka?
I really appreciate Commissioner Lindley's comment on that. I didn't have any questions on the docket at this time, but I do just want to say how much I appreciate Commissioner Lindley's point. I think that's a very good observation, and certainly that item that you referenced, item number 37 on our docket, certainly stands out as a great candidate for how one size fits all policies, which is where our commission has to reside. We try to be as fair and consistent statewide as possible, but when we have penalty policy pieces such as the high performer piece where it has zero flexibility built into it, we may have some outcomes like this one where you receive or don't receive benefits of certain reductions that just seem odd. And in this instance where there's a large instances of falsification of a relatively large number of administrative documents, that really jumps out as a very good glaring example of, obviously there are some bad outcome exceptions that any one-size-fits-all policy creates. So I would welcome that discussion, Commissioner, and appreciate you raising the point today, and just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Janeka, and I'll give staff a moment to respond in just a minute. But Commissioner Lindley, I couldn't agree more with your comments. And when I looked at this, I decided that we ought to go ahead with this particular order because it's not going to make any difference given the demonstration of financial inability to pay. I think the authorities are such that we're required to give a reduction where the compliance history tells us to give a reduction, but we can offset it with our authority to consider other factors as justice may require, which under existing authorities would be the way to handle this. And I want to expand a little bit and say a little bit more about falsification of tickets. Every environmental regulator in the country relies on the regulated community to be forthright and truthful. And I mean, this is nothing short of criminal in a way that increases the risk to public health and the environment. And it is not okay. How else can I say it? It's also been a great frustration of mine that that we are limited to administrative actions here in a state agency. The criminal prosecution of this is beyond our purview. And appropriately, there are walls in place that prevent us really from knowing anything about the criminal process here, even though we have staff, some staff that participate in those conversations, in those efforts. It is not the Commission's place to be involved in that. Again, sometimes much to my frustration. And ultimately, the discretion about how or whether to pursue these types of crimes is left to local governments, county prosecutors. And so to a certain extent, it's beyond our control. My hope is that that these cases are being thoroughly vetted, and further that the county prosecutors really do understand that our system of environmental regulation, really across the country, but true for Texas too, depends on people being forthright and not criminally falsifying any document. Let me just end with, if there were any prosecutors listening to this agenda now or at some point in the future, please take heed. This is important to protecting public health and the environment. Some of you may need no encouragement on this. Go get them. The others, I would say, there's real harm involved here. So consider that as you're making your choices about whether and how to prosecute. And with that long conversation, let me turn it back to staff to address sort of what we do when we get into a pickle of offering a compliance history reduction that in a particular case may not be appropriate. So Ms. Cordell, I'll turn it back to you or other staff to address that question. And Ms. Cordell,
hello, this is Brian.
Can't hear you. Oh, okay. Mr. Sinclair, good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. Sir. Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Sinclair for the Executive Director. In this case, we did a calculation, and as you already pointed out, in this case, because there were the inability to pay, the penalty calculation, it didn't make a big difference in this case. But I guess I would just say that I hear the concerns expressed by the commissioners this morning in this area, and as has already been mentioned, we are looking at the penalty policy, considering changes to the penalty policy, and we'll go back and look at the changes that we're proposing and make sure that we address the issue of falsification and whether or not any adjustments would be appropriate if we're alleging falsification in a penalty calculation, and whether we don't make adjustments or reductions downward, or whether we offset those reductions through good faith effort, through other factors as justice may require. Then we'll figure out how to do that and make that a part of what is discussed when we propose changes to the penalty policy.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. I appreciate that. Moving forward here, Ms. Smith, is there anyone signed in to speak?
No, no one signed in to speak.
And we'll hear from Mr. McWhorter next.
First, I'd just like to say I appreciate all of your comments and observations, and also want to say I appreciate all the parameters that enforcement staff have to work within under the penalty policy to make all the pieces fit together and ensure consistency. And I also appreciate that the penalty policy is open to review and revisiting from time to time, so these issues can be considered. And with all that, my office did review all of the items on this enforcement docket, and we recommend approval of the proposed orders.
Thank you, Mr. McWhorter, and I agree. Commissioner Lindley, any additional thoughts?
No, I appreciate that, and appreciate y'all listening to my comments today. So I don't have any questions or comments, and I'm comfortable moving forward with what's proposed today in front of us.
Yeah, they're great comments. Thank you. Commissioner Janeka.
No other comments or questions for me. If it's appropriate this time, I'm happy to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I would move that we adopt items 4 through 40 as recommended today by the Executive Director.
A second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Janeka?
I vote aye.
I also vote aye. The motion is unanimous. Ms. Smith, when you're ready, please call the next item.
Item 41 is the consideration for publication of proposed amended section 17.14 and 17.17 of 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 17, regarding tax relief for property used for environmental protection, and sections 18.25, 18.26, and 18.30 of Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 18, regarding rollback relief for pollution control requirements. The Executive Director's staff is here to present this item.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners, General Counsel, and Public Interest Counsel. On behalf of the Executive Director, I am Elizabeth Sartain with the Air Quality Division. With me is Dawn Redmond with the Environmental Law Division. For your consideration today are the Executive Director's proposed revisions to 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapters 17 and 18, Item 41. The proposed rulemaking would implement Senate Bill 2, Section 44, from the 86th Texas Legislature 2019 regular session regarding the title of the program in Chapter 18. Additionally, the proposed rulemaking would revise Chapters 17 and 18 to add heat recovery steam generators and 11 other pollution control property items to both Tier 1 tables, as well as make other revisions to accommodate the addition of heat recovery steam generators. Finally, the proposed rulemaking would fulfill the Commission's statutory and regulatory requirements to review and update as necessary the Chapters 17 and 18 expedited review lists and Tier 1 tables. Staff respectfully requests permission to publish this proposed rulemaking, solicit public comment, and hold public hearings. Staff also requests permission to make non-substantive revisions to comply with Texas Register requirements. Thank you. We are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. I have none. Commissioner Lindley?
I have no questions. I commend staff and the committee for putting this together. This is no small task. This was a heavy lift. So I appreciate the work done, and I'll stop there.
Thank you. Commissioner Janeka?
No questions for me at this time. I very much second Commissioner Lindley's thoughts there. I really appreciate all the good work from ED staff, but also from the advisory committee that did a lot of work on this question as well. Just appreciate all the effort. I'm comfortable right now.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, is anyone signed in to speak on this item?
No one is registered on this one.
Thank you. Mr. McWhirter, what are your thoughts?
OPIC recommends approval for publication of the proposed changes to the Commission's Chapter 17 and 18 rules so the Commission may receive and consider comment from all affected stakeholders. And we'd also like to acknowledge the Tax Relief for Pollution Control Property Advisory Committee for their work in developing their recommendations.
Thank you. And I want to add my voice to those thanking the committee and our staff for all the work on this. We have spent a lot of time and effort on it, and I think the proposal looks good and that we're ready to put it out for comment. So I'll entertain any additional thoughts or a motion. Commissioner Lindley?
I will make a motion that we approve the publication of the amended sections of 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapters 17 and 18, as recommended by the Executive Director.
A second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Janeka?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The motion carries. Ms. Smith, when you're ready, please call the next item.
Item number 42 is consideration for publication of the proposed amendments to 30 Texas Administrative Code sections 30.20, 30.24, 30.33, 30.34, 30.36, 30.81, 30.95, 30.129, and 30.402, and new section 30.29 implementing HB 1508 from the 85th legislative session and HB 1342, SB 37, and SB 1217 from the 86th legislature. The Executive Director's staff is here to present this item.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners, General Counsel, and Public Interest Counsel. On behalf of the Executive Director, I'm Haya Zeman with the Permitting and Registration Support Division. With me is Hollis Henley with the Environmental Law Division. The proposed rulemaking would amend 30 Texas Administrative Code, sections 30.20, 24, 33, 34, 36, 81, 95, 129, and 402 to ensure consistency between the rules and their applicable statutes as amended by House Bill 1508 from the 85th Texas Legislature in 2017, and also House Bill 1342, Senate Bill 37, Senate Bill 1217 from the 86th Texas Legislature from 2019. The proposed amendments will remove language that gives the agency authority to suspend or revoke a license, to disqualify an individual from receiving a license, or to deny an individual the opportunity to take a licensing examination based solely on the individual's conviction of an offense that did not directly relate to the duties and responsibilities of the licensed occupation and that was committed less than 5 years before the date the individual applied for the license. The proposed amendments would also address the agency's procedure for providing written notice to individuals whose license the agency intends to deny because of an individual's prior conviction of an offense, and it also removes language allowing the agency to deny or take other disciplinary actions against license holders or potential license holders who are in default of their student loans. The proposed rulemaking would also add a new section 30.29 to address the procedure for individuals to petition the agency for reimbursement of core class registration fees and TCEQ application fees from training providers if they were not notified by the training provider that they may be ineligible for an initial occupational license due to their criminal history and were subsequently denied the license due to a criminal conviction. Additionally, the proposed rulemaking will remove language that specifically references the Texas State Board of Plumbing Examiners by name and replace it with an alternative generic language that references the licensing agency that regulates the plumbing occupation. The purpose of this change is to avoid the need for additional rulemaking should the licensing of plumbers be moved from the board to an alternative agency in a future legislative session. Staff respectfully recommends approval to publish the proposed rule changes to 30 TAC Chapter 30, Occupation Licenses and Registration, for public comment. Staff also respectfully requests permission to make non-substantive revisions to comply with the Texas Register requirements. Thank you, and we're available to answer any questions.
Thank you again, Ms. Zeman, for the presentation. I have none. Commissioner Lindley, any questions?
No questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Commissioner Janeka?
None. I think this is a good, faithful attempt to propose adoption of several legislative bills, all in this area of our agency's work. Thank you.
Ms. Smith, is there anyone signed in to speak on this item?
No one is signed in.
Mr. McWhorter, what do you think?
OPIC agrees that the proposed rule changes are needed to implement legislative requirements for occupational licensing and registration. We recommend approval for publication of the proposed amendments to the Commission's Chapter 30 rules as presented by the ED.
Thank you. I agree. I think we're ready to put this out for comment, and I'll entertain any additional thoughts or a motion. Commissioner Lindley?
No thoughts.
Commissioner Janeka?
I will make a motion that we approve the publication of the proposed amendments and new section to 30 Texas Administrative Code Chapter 30 as recommended by the Executive Director.
I second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Janeka?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The motion carries. Ms. Smith, when you're ready, please call the next item.
Item 43 is the adoption of amended sections 116.110, 116.116, 116.710, and 116.721, and new sections 116.118 of 30 Texas Administrative Code regarding the control of air pollution by permits for new construction or modification, and the corresponding revisions to the state implementation plan. The Executive Director's staff is here to present the item.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners, General Counsel, and Public Interest Counsel. For the record, I'm Michael Wilhoit with the Air Permits Division on behalf of the Executive Director. With me is John Minter from the Environmental Law Division. This adopted rulemaking amends Chapter 116, Control of Air Pollution by Permits for New Construction or Modification, to implement Texas Health and Safety Code, Section 382.004, as amended by House Bill 2726 of the 86th Texas Legislature in 2019. The rules, if adopted, will allow applicants for a permit amendment to begin construction at their own risk when the draft permit has been issued and certain other criteria have been satisfied. The adopted rules will be submitted as revisions to the state implementation plan. The proposed rules were published in the February 14, 2020 issue of the Texas Register. A public hearing was offered on March 12, 2020, and the public comment period closed on March 17, 2020. The rule team did receive public comments which were supportive of the rules as proposed. The rule team did not make any changes to the rules for adoption. In conclusion, staff respectfully recommends adoption of these amendments. Additionally, staff requests authorization to make non-substantive revisions necessary to comply with Texas Register requirements. Thank you. We are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. I have none. Commissioner Lindley?
No questions.
Commissioner Janeka?
None for me, thanks.
Ms. Smith, is anyone signed in to speak on this item?
No one is signed in.
And Mr. McWhorter, what are your thoughts?
OPIC recommends adoption of the revisions to the Commission's Chapter 116 rules to implement House Bill 2726 as presented by the Executive Director.
I agree. Colleagues, this is another legislative implementation rulemaking. There are only favorable comments on it. I'm ready to adopt it. And I'll take any additional thoughts or a motion. Commissioner Lindley?
I'll make a motion I move that we adopt the amendments to 30 Texas Administrative Code sections 116.110, 116.116, 116.710, 116.721, and new 30 Texas Administrative Code section 116.118, and corresponding revisions to the state implementation plan as recommended by the Executive Director.
I second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Janeka?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The motion carries. Ms. Smith, when you're ready, please call the next item.
Item 44 is the consideration of the adoption of amended 30 Texas Administrative Code Section 342.26 regarding regulation of certain aggregate production operations. The Executive Director's staff is here to present.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, General Counsel, and Public Interest Counsel. On behalf of the Executive Director, I am Shelby Williams with the Water Quality Division. With me is Michael Parr with the Environmental Law Division. If adopted, this rulemaking would amend 30 Texas Administrative Code Chapter 342, Regulation of Aggregate Production Operations, to implement changes to the Texas Water Code as amended by House Bill 907 from the 86th Legislative Session. HB 907 amended Texas Water Code Chapter 28A by increasing the investigation frequency of all APOs in the first 6 years of registration, allowing unannounced periodic inspections at APOs issued a notice of violation, clarifying the training requirements for TCEQ investigators, increasing the maximum penalty for each year an APO operates without a registration, increasing the maximum total penalty for APOs operating 3 or more years without a registration, and increasing the maximum annual registration fee from $1,000 to $1,500. This rulemaking would amend Chapter 342.26, which currently sets the maximum annual registration fee for APOs at $1,000. This rulemaking would replace the monetary amount of $1,000 with the phrase, the amount specified in the Texas Water Code Chapter 28A, to provide consistency as well as compliance with future legislation. The proposed rules were published in the February 28, 2020 issue of the Texas Register. The public comment period closed on March 29, 2020. The rule team received 4 public comments, and based on those comments, the rule team made no substantive changes. In conclusion, staff respectfully recommends adoption of this rulemaking to Chapter 342. Additionally, staff requests authorization to make non-substantive revisions necessary to comply with Texas Register requirements. Thank you. We are available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. I have none. Commissioner Lindley?
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Janeka?
No questions. I appreciate the public input that we received on this item, and I appreciate Edie's consideration, and I think that's an appropriate response on it.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, do we have anyone signed in?
No one is registered for this item.
Thank you. Mr. McWhirter?
OPIC recommends adoption of the amended 30 TSC section 342.26 to implement House Bill 907 as presented by the Executive Director.
Thank you. And House Bill 907 set out to do quite a few things. What's before us today is a rule change that simply changes the registration fee. And I think we're ready to adopt it. I'll invite any additional thoughts or motion. Commissioner Lindley?
I'm ready to move forward with adoption as well.
Likewise, I will move that we adopt the amendment to Section 342.26 of 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 342, as recommended by the Executive Director.
A second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Lindley, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Janeka?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The motion carries. Ms. Smith, when you're ready, please call the next items.
Items 45 through 48 are for closed session, and the Commission will not meet in closed session today.
With that, the time is 11 a.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you.